James screamed as his reflection in the bathroom mirror suddenly aged 50 years, skin wrinkling and hair whitening before snapping back to his 28-year-old face. The antique music box upstairs began its haunting melody immediately after. The tinkling notes of Frère Jacques drifting down through the Victorian house he'd inherited from his grandmother 3 days ago. Every piece of furniture in the living room started sliding across the hardwood floors on its own, chairs spinning in lazy circles while the coffee table scraped toward the front door. He stumbled backward into the hallway, bile rising in his throat, as the grandfather clock's pendulum swung sideways instead of down, ticking impossibly against gravity. The music box grew louder, more insistent, each note seeming to pulse through the floorboards beneath his bare feet. Isabella's voice echoed from the kitchen. Impossible, since his sister had died in the car accident 6 months ago. The reason he'd fled to this inherited house in rural Vermont to escape his guilt. "James, come find me," Isabella called, her voice exactly as he remembered from childhood, high and sweet and trusting. "I'm waiting for you upstairs." The doll sat on the 7th step, exactly halfway up the staircase. James had never seen it before, yet recognition hit him like ice water. Red hair in wild curls, striped shirt, overalls with a single broken strap. The thing's plastic eyes tracked his movement as he approached, and its mouth, a sewn gash that shouldn't have been able to move, curved into a grin that revealed tiny pointed teeth. "Hi, I'm Chucky," it said in a voice that mixed childish innocence with something ancient and hungry. "Wanna play?" The music box upstairs stopped abruptly, leaving only silence that pressed against James's eardrums like cotton. He gripped the banister, wood grain rough under his sweating palm, and forced himself to climb. 1 step, 2. The doll's head turned to follow his progress, neck rotating with mechanical precision. "Isabella's been waiting," Chucky continued, plastic lips moving just slightly out of sync with the words. "She wants to tell you about the accident." "Isabella's dead." James's voice cracked. He hadn't spoken those words aloud since the funeral. Dead doesn't mean gone. The doll's arm lifted, pointing up the stairs with a rigid finger. "She knows you were driving that night. She knows about the pills you took, the ones that made you sleepy." James's knees buckled. He grabbed the banister with both hands, splinters biting into his palms. Nobody knew about the sleeping pills. Not the police, not the paramedics, not even the guilt-ridden confession he'd written and never sent. He'd switched seats with Isabella's body before the first responders arrived, letting them assume she'd been driving. "Liar," he whispered. Chucky's laugh was Isabella's laugh, the one she'd made when she was 7 and had successfully hidden his Halloween candy. The sound tore through James's chest like broken glass. The temperature in the house plummeted. His breath came out in white puffs, and frost began forming on the banister under his hands. Every window downstairs slammed shut simultaneously, the sound like gunshots. The front door's deadbolt turned with a decisive click. "The music box belonged to our great-grandmother," Isabella's voice said through the doll's throat. "Grandmother told me the story before she died, about the children who played with it, about what happened to them." James climbed another step, then another. He couldn't stop moving upward, pulled by some invisible force stronger than fear. The doll's plastic eyes never blinked, never looked away, and in their painted depths, He saw Isabella's last moment, her face turning toward him in the passenger seat, confusion replacing trust as she realized he was falling asleep at the wheel. Each child who wound the music box made a wish, the doll continued. But the wishes came with a price. Great-grandmother wished to never be alone, so the children stayed. Forever. At the top of the stairs, the hallway stretched impossibly long, doors lining both sides like a hotel corridor. Some doors were cracked open, revealing glimpses of movement in the darkness beyond. Small fingers curled around door frames. Eyes that reflected light like an animal's peered out at him. The music box sat on a small table at the far end of the hall, its lid open to reveal a tiny ballerina frozen mid-pirouette. The melody began again, slower this time, each note hanging in the air like a death knell. I wished for James to come home. Isabella's voice whispered from everywhere and nowhere. I wished for him to know the truth. The doll was beside him now, though he hadn't seen it move. Chucky's hand, no bigger than a child's but strong as steel cables, gripped James's wrist. Your turn to make a wish, it said. Down the hallway, the doors began opening wider. Children stepped out, some in nightgowns from decades past, others in modern clothes. All of them had the same plastic sheen to their skin, the same painted-on features, the same terrible smile. They moved with jerky, mechanical steps, like marionettes controlled by an amateur puppeteer. James tried to run, but the hallway stretched longer with each step. The music box grew larger as he approached, its melody louder until the tinkling notes felt like hammers against his skull. The ballerina inside the box turned her head to look at him, her porcelain features cracking as her smile widened. Make your wish, James. Isabella's voice came from the ballerina now, lips that shouldn't have moved forming words that echoed off the walls. Wish to take back that night. Wish to save me. His hand reached for the music box's winding key without his permission. The brass was ice cold against his fingers, but he couldn't let go. The children in the hallway moved closer, their plastic feet making no sound on the carpet. I wish, James began, then stopped. In the reflection of the music box's mirror, he saw the truth. Isabella stood behind him, not the plastic doll version, but his real sister, translucent and shimmering. Her face was kind, forgiving, the way it had been when they were children, and she'd always covered for his mistakes. Don't wish, James, she whispered, her real voice cutting through the mechanical symphony. That's how it traps you. That's how it trapped all of them. The doll children hissed in unison, their painted faces contorting with rage. Chucky's grip on his wrist tightened until bones ground together. You killed her, the doll snarled, its voice losing all pretense of childhood innocence. You deserve to be trapped here forever. But Isabella stepped closer, her ghostly hand covering his on the winding key. The fire, James. Like when we were kids and burned our bad report cards. Fire destroys the anchors. James remembered now, his sister's stubborn optimism, her belief that every problem had a solution if you were brave enough to find it. She'd been the one to suggest burning evidence of their childhood mishaps, claiming fire made things disappear completely. He yanked his hand free from Chucky's grip and grabbed the music box, its metal edges cutting into his palms. The doll children lunged forward as he threw it against the wall with all his strength. The box shattered, its mirror fragments scattering like stars, and the ballerina's head rolled across the floor. But the melody continued, emanating from the pieces themselves. The basement. Isabella's voice was fading already. Grandmother's furnace still works. James ran, pushing past the grasping hands of plastic children, their fingers leaving scratch marks on his arms. The hallway shrank back to normal size as he reached the stairs, the house groaning and settling around him like a dying creature. Chucky crawled after him, half its face missing from the impact, revealing circuitry and wiring beneath the plastic skin. In the basement, the old coal furnace squatted like a metal monster, its door hanging open to reveal glowing embers. James gathered the music box pieces, each fragment singing its haunting melody, and fed them to the flames. The metal screamed as it melted, the sound like children crying. The house shuddered once, violently, then fell silent. James climbed back upstairs to find every doll gone, every door closed. The grandfather clock ticked normally, its pendulum swinging down as gravity intended. In the bathroom mirror, his reflection showed only himself, older than when he'd arrived, marked by the night's terror, but alive and alone. He packed his grandmother's car before dawn and drove back to the city, never looking in the rearview mirror. The inheritance money paid for a good lawyer who helped him file the true accident report, finally admitting his role in Isabella's death. The sleeping pills, the moment he dozed off, the choice to let everyone think she'd been driving. 6 months later, working as a night security guard at a children's hospital, penance perhaps or atonement, James heard a familiar melody from the pediatric wing. Frere Jacques played by a music box somewhere in the darkness. His hands didn't shake as he followed the sound to its source, a little girl's room where a wind-up carousel played for a sleeping patient. Just a music box, just a sick child, just the ordinary sorrows of the world. But James never bought toys for his nephew's birthday after that, and he always checked the mirrors twice before leaving any room. Some fears, he learned, were worth keeping. 3 years passed in careful normalcy. James had moved to Portland, found steady work at a crisis counseling center, and built a life measured in small redemptions. He helped teenagers navigate addiction, talked parents through their children's mental health crises, and learned that healing others sometimes healed yourself. The nightmares came less frequently, and when they did, they were ordinary ones, car crashes, not music boxes. Then Emerson arrived. The boy was 11, thin as paper, with dark circles under eyes that seemed far too old for his face. His foster mother brought him in after he'd been found talking to an empty corner of his bedroom for 3 hours straight, carrying on both sides of what appeared to be an animated conversation. He insists someone named Chucky lives in his closet, the foster mother explained to James during intake. Says this friend tells him stories about other children who used to live in the house. Children who disappeared. James's pen stopped moving across the intake form. Ice crystallized in his veins despite the office's warmth. Chucky, he repeated, voice carefully neutral. Some imaginary friend nonsense, the woman continued. The previous family moved out suddenly, left most of their furniture behind, including toys in the boy's new room. There's this old music box that plays constantly. I can't figure out how to turn it off. The pen snapped in James's grip. That afternoon, James drove to the address the foster mother had provided, a Victorian house on the outskirts of town that could have been his grandmother's twin. Same wraparound porch, same gabled windows, Same feeling of accumulated secrets pressing against the walls from within. Emerson met him at the door, small hand clutching a battered teddy bear that had seen better decades. "You came," the boy said, as if he'd been expecting James specifically. "Chucky said you would. He remembers you." The foster mother rolled her eyes apologetically. "This is what I mean. He talks like this thing is real." James knelt to Emerson's eye level, studying the child's face. No plastic sheen, no painted features, just a scared kid whose imagination had perhaps brushed against something it shouldn't have. "Where is Chucky now?" James asked gently. "Upstairs. He's showing the other children the music box. They like the dancing, lady." Emerson's voice dropped to a whisper. "But she's not really dancing. She's trying to get out." The familiar melody drifted down from the second floor, each note a needle through James's chest. Frère Jacques played with the same mechanical precision he remembered, the same haunting sweetness that masked something hungry underneath. "Mrs. Patterson," James said to the foster mother, "I need you to take Emerson somewhere else for the next few hours. A movie, dinner, anything. Don't come back until after sunset." She started to protest, but something in his expression stopped her. Maybe it was the way his hands had begun to shake, or how all the color had drained from his face. Within minutes, she was bundling Emerson into her car. "Don't let him win," the boy called through the window as they drove away. "The dancing lady says he cheats." James stood alone before the house as afternoon shadows lengthened across the porch. He thought destroying the music box would end it, but curses were like cancer. Sometimes they metastasized, spread to new hosts, found new ways to survive. The front door stood slightly ajar. Inside, the furniture arrangement was identical to his grandmother's house. Sofa facing the fireplace, grandfather clock in the corner, family photos on the mantel showing strangers' faces. But the photos moved as he watched, figures turning their heads to track his movement, painted smiles growing wider. "Hello, James." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. "We've missed you." Chucky sat in the same chair where James's grandmother used to read bedtime stories, but the doll had changed. Burn scars covered half its face in melted plastic ridges, and one eye had been replaced with a button that didn't match. Its remaining real eye fixed on James with unmistakable recognition. "You can't keep running from what you are," the doll continued in Isabella's voice. "A killer, a coward, someone who destroys everything he touches." "I faced that truth already," James said, surprised by the steadiness of his own voice. "I confessed. I'm making amends." "Are you?" Chucky's head tilted with mechanical precision. "Tell me about Marcus." The name hit like a physical blow. Marcus, the teenager who'd called the crisis line 6 months ago, desperate and suicidal, while James had been distracted by paperwork. The boy who'd hung up when James failed to give him full attention, who'd been found dead in his bedroom the next morning. "That wasn't my fault," James whispered. But the words felt hollow. "Wasn't it?" The doll stood on the chair, its movements jerky but purposeful. "How many calls have you half listened to? How many people needed your complete attention while you were thinking about your own guilt instead?" The music box upstairs grew louder, joined by others, a symphony of cursed melodies from different rooms. James realized the house was full of them, dozens of music boxes playing at once, each one a trap that had claimed children across decades. "Emerson will be next," Chucky said conversationally. "He's already talking to the other children. Soon he'll want to wind one of the boxes himself, make his own wish. They all do, eventually. Not if I stop it first." James climbed the stairs, each step harder than the last, as the house itself seemed to resist him. The hallway stretched and contracted like a breathing thing, doors appearing and disappearing as he passed. From behind each door came the sound of children playing, the laughter high and bright and wrong. In the master bedroom, he found them, music boxes covering every surface, their lids open to reveal dancing figures frozen in eternal pirouettes. Ballerinas, soldiers, carousel horses, all turning to the same haunting melody in perfect, terrible synchronization. At the center sat the largest box, ornate with silver filigree and precious stones. Inside, instead of a dancing figure, was a perfect miniature of the house itself, complete with tiny furniture and smaller music boxes within. "Recursive trap," James breathed, understanding finally. Each box contains another trap, another layer. That's how it spreads. He began gathering the boxes, his arms full of cursed treasures that seemed to grow heavier with each one collected. The melodies grew discordant as they were moved, the dancing figures spinning faster, their painted faces contorting with rage. Downstairs, the fireplace roared to life on its own, flames leaping high enough to lick the mantel. James fed box after box to the fire, each one screaming as it burned, each melody cutting off with a sound like breaking glass. Chucky appeared in the doorway, dragging itself forward on damaged limbs. "You cannot destroy us all," it snarled. "We are in every antique shop, every estate sale, every grandmother's attic. We are the wishes children make in the dark, the promises parents can't keep. We are inevitable." "Maybe," James said, throwing the last music box into the flames. "But not today, and not to Emerson." The house shuddered as the final box died in the fire. Cracks appeared in the walls, spreading like spiderwebs across faded wallpaper. The grandfather clock's pendulum swung wildly before stopping entirely. Chucky's remaining eye dimmed to black plastic. "This isn't over, James." "It never is." But the doll's voice was fading, and when the flames finally died down, nothing remained but ash and silence. James waited outside for Mrs. Patterson and Emerson to return, his clothes reeking of smoke and melted plastic. When the boys saw him, he ran forward and threw his arms around James's waist. "The music stopped," Emerson said, voice bright with relief. "The dancing lady is free now. She said to tell you thank you." That night, James called in a favor with a real estate friend and had the house condemned for fire damage. Within a week, it was demolished, the ground salted, and left empty. He arranged for Emerson to be moved to a different foster home, far from any antiques or inherited treasures. But he kept the boy's phone number and called every week to check in. Because some battles weren't fought once, they were fought every day in small acts of attention and care, in the choice to listen completely when someone needed help. The nightmares still came sometimes, but now they were balanced by other dreams. Children laughing in playgrounds, music boxes silent on dusty shelves, and Isabella's approving smile as he helped another lost soul find their way home.